There are rare moments in history when the universe becomes strangely quiet, not silent in a physical way, but quiet in a deeper sense, as if the massive machinery of the cosmos pauses for a brief second, and something subtle shifts, not loudly, not dramatically, no explosions in the sky, no alarms, just a quiet change that only a few people ever notice. Right now, astronomers, scientists, and even ancient astronomical records are pointing towards something unusual, a short 48-hour cosmic window, a rare alignment of celestial bodies, a moment when planetary motion, solar energy, and lunar positioning briefly synchronize. Individually, these things happen all the time, but when they occur together, they create something different, an energetic opening, a moment of unusual cosmic balance. Some researchers describe it as a rare astronomical configuration. Ancient traditions described it in a far more poetic way. They called it a door, not a door made of wood or metal, but a doorway in awareness, a moment when perception sharpens, intuition deepens, and the mind suddenly begins asking questions it normally ignores. The strange part? Most people will never notice anything. They will wake up, rush to work, scroll endlessly through their phones, watch the news, argue online, and fall asleep, completely unaware that something subtle may be unfolding above them. But a small number of people will feel it, a sudden calm, a strange clarity, an unexpected realization that something meaningful is happening. And throughout history, moments like these have quietly changed lives. Because sometimes the universe doesn't shout. Sometimes it simply opens a door. Thousands of years before telescopes existed, before satellites, observatories, and powerful computers began mapping the sky, human beings were already looking up, night after night, generation after generation. Ancient civilizations studied the stars with a patience that is difficult for the modern world to imagine. They didn't have digital clocks or scientific instruments, yet they developed an extraordinary awareness of the sky's patterns. The sky to them was not random. It was a system, a rhythm, a cosmic mechanism moving with precision. And across multiple ancient cultures, separated by oceans and centuries, something remarkable appears in their records. They believe the sky sometimes created windows, moments when the universe seemed to align in ways that affected human awareness itself. To modern ears, that might sound mystical, but to the ancients, it was simply observation. They watched the sky carefully and noticed that certain celestial alignments appeared to coincide with unusual human experiences. Let's start with the Mayan civilization. The Mayans were among the most advanced skywatchers in human history. Their astronomers tracked the cycles of Venus with astonishing accuracy. They calculated solar and lunar eclipses centuries in advance. But beyond pure astronomy, the Mayans believed that planetary movements influence periods of heightened awareness. Certain alignments were treated as times of transition, moments when decisions mattered more, moments when leaders consulted priests, rulers paused for reflection, and entire cities performed rituals designed to bring clarity and balance. Then there were the ancient Egyptians. The Egyptians aligned many of their temples and monuments with specific stars. The Great Pyramid itself is aligned with incredible astronomical precision. Why would a civilization devote such effort to aligning structures with celestial bodies? Because they believed the sky reflected deeper patterns. They saw the heavens as a mirror of earthly events. To them, certain alignments represented moments when the natural order shifted slightly, when human awareness could access deeper understanding. Then we moved to Babylon. The Babylonians kept detailed clay tablet records of celestial observation. These records contain some of the earliest known astronomical data in human history. But what's fascinating is that many of these tablets describe celestial events not only in terms of movement, but in terms of meaning. Certain alignments were seen as periods when the world itself felt different, periods when intuition sharpened, when dreams became vivid, when people reported unusual insights. Now, to modern science, these accounts may sound symbolic or psychological, but what's remarkable is how consistent these observations are across cultures. Civilizations separated by geography and language still describe something similar. They all believed the sky worked like a cosmic clock, just like seasons repeat, just like tides follow lunar cycles. The ancients believed human awareness also moved through cycles influenced by celestial rhythms. Most of the time, life moved normally, but occasionally, very rarely, the cosmic clock reached a position where multiple celestial factors aligned. And when that happened, they believed a window opened. Not a literal window you could see, but a temporary shift in the relationship between the human mind and the cosmos. A moment when the boundary between everyday awareness and deeper perception became unusually thin. These moments were not considered supernatural. They were not described as miracles. Instead, they were treated almost like environmental conditions. Just like a storm changes the atmosphere. These alignments were believed to change the mental atmosphere. Ancient writings describe people experiencing unusual states of awareness during these windows. Not everyone, but some. They reported things like vivid dreams that felt unusually meaningful, sudden realizations about personal problems they had struggled with for years, emotional breakthroughs that seemed to arrive without warning, moments of powerful intuition, an inner knowing that seemed clearer than normal thought. In ancient traditions, these experiences were not dismissed. They were studied, recorded, and sometimes even expected. In some cultures, these windows were believed to last 3 days. In others, only 2 days. A brief period where the sky seemed unusually active. Planetary alignments, solar changes, lunar positioning, all occurring in a precise sequence. The ancients believed that when these factors aligned, they created a temporary amplification of human awareness. Think of it like adjusting the sensitivity of a radio receiver. Most of the time, the signal is faint, but occasionally, the conditions become perfect. Suddenly, the signal becomes clear. Ancient sky watchers believed these cosmic windows worked in a similar way. The human mind became slightly more receptive, slightly more aware, slightly more capable of noticing patterns that normally remained hidden. But here's the detail that appears again and again in ancient texts. And it's perhaps the most interesting part of the entire idea. The writings repeatedly say something similar. Only a few people would notice. Not because the event was secret, not because it was hidden, but because noticing required something rare: stillness, attention, and awareness. In ancient societies, daily life often included periods of quiet observation. There was less noise, less distraction, less constant stimulation. People spent time outdoors under the night sky. They watched the stars move. They noticed subtle changes in the environment. Because of that, they were more likely to notice when something felt different. But the ancient texts warned that even then, most people still missed it. They continued with their routines, focused on survival, trade, or daily responsibilities. Only the observant few noticed the subtle shifts, those who were paying attention, those who were quiet enough to observe their own thoughts, those who were willing to pause and reflect. The ancients believed these individuals were able to recognize the window when it opened, not through magic, not through prophecy, but through awareness. Now fast forward to the modern world. Human life today is louder than it has ever been. Notifications flash across our screens every few seconds. Endless streams of information compete for our attention. Social media feeds update constantly. News cycles never stop. The average person now consumes more information in a single day than people centuries ago might have encountered in months. In this environment, stillness has become rare. Silence feels uncomfortable. Attention jumps rapidly from one stimulus to another. And in a world like this, even if a cosmic window opened above us, most people would never notice. Not because it isn't happening, but because their attention is somewhere else. Buried in screens, lost in endless scrolling, focused on noise. This is exactly what ancient traditions warned about. They believed cosmic windows required a certain kind of awareness to be noticed, a mind that could pause, observe, reflect, without constant distraction. In other words, exactly the opposite of modern life. Which brings us to the present moment. Because according to astronomers studying current planetary movement, something extremely unusual is approaching. A rare configuration in the sky. Multiple celestial factors aligning within a very short period of time. A brief moment when planetary motion, solar activity, and lunar positioning synchronize in a way that doesn't happen often. Not once every year, not even once every decade. A rare window, a moment of cosmic alignment, a window that will last roughly 48 hours. And just like the ancients described thousands of years ago, most people will go about their lives completely unaware. But a small number of people might pause, look up, reflect, and feel that something in the universe has quietly shifted. Because sometimes the sky doesn't announce its changes with dramatic events. Sometimes it simply opens a window. Astronomers describe it in technical language. A rare celestial configuration. A short period when several cosmic movements briefly synchronize. The moon, several key planets, subtle shifts in solar energy patterns. Individually, none of these events are unusual. In fact, they happen all the time. Planets orbit the sun in predictable paths. The moon cycles through phases every month. Solar activity rises and falls in repeating patterns. But occasionally, these independent cycles overlap in very specific ways. When they do, something interesting happens. For a brief period of time, multiple celestial rhythms align. Think of the universe as an enormous mechanical clock, a clock with thousands of moving gears, each gear turning at its own speed. Some gears move quickly, completing a cycle every few hours. Others move slowly, taking years or even centuries to complete a full rotation. Most of the time, these gears move independently. They turn past each other, intersect briefly, then continue on their separate paths. But once in a while, something rare occurs. Several of those gears line up perfectly. For a short moment, their movements synchronize. When that happens, the entire system behaves slightly differently, not dramatically, not in a way that causes visible fireworks in the sky, but in subtle ways that scientists and astronomers can measure. Gravitational interactions shift slightly. Solar radiation patterns fluctuate. Magnetic influences ripple through space. To most people, these changes are invisible. You won't look up and see glowing portals in the sky. You won't hear thunder from space. The stars won't rearrange themselves. On the surface, everything will appear completely normal. But beneath that ordinary appearance, something rare is happening. The cosmic machinery briefly enters a state of alignment. And according to both modern researchers and ancient observers, these moments sometimes coincide with unusual experiences on Earth. Not physical events like earthquakes or storms, but psychological and emotional shifts. Throughout history, people have reported strange internal changes during certain astronomical alignments. Moments of sudden clarity, ideas appearing without warning, long-standing emotional burdens suddenly lifting. It's as if the mind itself becomes clearer, like a fog that had been hanging over your thoughts suddenly disappears. Many people describe these moments as breakthroughs. A problem they struggled with for years suddenly becomes obvious. A life decision that once felt confusing suddenly becomes clear. Creative ideas seem to arrive out of nowhere. Writers have described suddenly understanding the ending of a story they had been struggling to finish. Inventors have spoken about sudden flashes of insight that solve technical problems. Philosophers throughout history have described moments where complex ideas suddenly arrange themselves in their mind, like pieces of a puzzle snapping into place. Of course, modern science approaches these experiences cautiously. Researchers often explain them through psychology and biology. For example, changes in light patterns can influence human mood and awareness. The moon affects tides in the ocean, and some scientists believe lunar cycles may subtly influence biological rhythms in living organisms. Solar activity can affect Earth's magnetic field, which in turn may interact with neurological processes in ways scientists are still studying. Then there are circadian rhythms, the internal clocks inside the human body that regulate sleep, alertness, and hormone production. These rhythms are influenced by environmental factors such as sunlight and darkness. Small shifts in these patterns can sometimes affect mental clarity or emotional states. From a scientific perspective, sudden insights or emotional shifts during astronomical events may simply be the result of complex interactions between biology, environment, and psychology. But long before modern science existed, ancient civilizations had their own interpretation. They believed something deeper was happening. They believed certain celestial alignments opened what they called the inner gate. Not a physical gate, not a supernatural portal, but a temporary state in which the human mind became unusually receptive. A moment when awareness expanded slightly, when intuition sharpened, when deeper thoughts rose more easily to the surface. In ancient philosophy, the mind was often compared to a mirror. Most of the time, that mirror is covered in dust, distractions, stress, noise, endless thoughts competing for attention. But occasionally the dust clears, the mirror becomes clean, and suddenly the mind reflects reality with unusual clarity. Ancient sky watchers believed cosmic alignments could sometimes create conditions where this mental clarity became easier to access. They didn't claim the stars were controlling human thoughts. Instead, they believed celestial rhythms influenced the broader environment in subtle ways, just like the moon influences tides, just like seasons influence plant growth. They believed cosmic cycles could influence human awareness. When certain alignments occurred, the mind became more sensitive, more reflective, more capable of seeing patterns that normally went unnoticed. But here's where the idea becomes truly fascinating. Ancient traditions repeatedly emphasized that these windows didn't affect everyone equally. When a cosmic window opened, people tended to divide into two groups: those who noticed something unusual and those who didn't. Most people would go through the entire period without experiencing anything different. Their routines would continue exactly as normal. They would wake up, work, eat, talk, scroll through their phones, watch television, and fall asleep without sensing any change at all. But a smaller group of people would notice subtle shifts. They might feel an unexpected calm, a sudden desire to reflect on their life, a strange clarity about decisions they had been avoiding. They might experience unusually vivid dreams, or find themselves asking deeper questions about their purpose and direction. These experiences weren't always dramatic. In fact, they were usually quiet, almost easy to miss. A single thought, a moment of stillness, a sudden realization while sitting alone. Ancient philosophers believed the difference between these two groups was not destiny or fate. It was awareness. The people who noticed the cosmic window were simply paying attention. Their minds were quieter, less distracted, more open to subtle changes in their internal world. The others were too busy, too distracted, too overwhelmed by daily noise to notice the shift. This idea appears again and again across ancient traditions. Cosmic windows exist, but they are quiet, subtle, easy to overlook. And when they open, they reveal themselves only to those who are paying attention. Which raises a fascinating question. If a rare cosmic alignment is about to create a 48-hour window, how many people will actually notice it? Because history suggests the answer is very small. Most people will miss it entirely. But a very small number, might pause long enough to feel something shift inside their own mind. And when that happens, the experience can change the way they see everything. Right now, humanity is more distracted than at any other time in history. Every minute, thousands of signals compete for our attention. Notifications lighting up our phones, endless scrolling through social media feeds, videos autoplaying, messages arriving every few seconds. The modern world is loud, not just physically loud, but mentally loud. Our attention is constantly being pulled outward, jumping rapidly from one piece of information to another. One moment we're reading news, the next moment we're watching a video. A few seconds later we're checking messages or refreshing a feed. In this environment, something important quietly disappears. Awareness. Because awareness works very differently from attention. Attention is fast and reactive. It chases whatever flashes the brightest. But awareness is slow. It requires silence, presence, observation. The ability to pause long enough to notice what is happening beneath the surface of everyday life. And during rare cosmic windows like this one, the people who notice something unusual often share very similar traits. They slow down, they reflect, they pay attention to subtle changes in their thoughts and emotions. They aren't constantly chasing the next distraction. Because of this, they sometimes experience something surprising. A sudden urge to rethink their life direction. Unexpected emotional clarity about a situation that once felt confusing. A deep calm that appears without any obvious reason. Or powerful creative ideas that seem to arrive from nowhere. Across cultures and throughout history, people who experience these moments often describe the feeling in the same way. They say it felt like something suddenly clicked, a realization, a shift in perspective, a moment where pieces of their life suddenly made sense, not because the universe singled them out, not because they were chosen, but because they were paying attention when the moment arrived. Imagine standing inside a quiet forest. If you're shouting, running, and constantly making noise, you miss almost everything around you. But if you stop moving, if you become still, suddenly you begin to notice things you couldn't hear before. The wind moving through the trees, birds calling in the distance, leaves shifting on the ground. The forest was always alive with sound. You just couldn't hear it until you became quiet. The universe works in a very similar way. Its signals are often subtle, quiet, easy to overlook. Most people will pass through this 48-hour window without noticing anything at all because their attention is already occupied. Their minds are filled with noise. But a small number of people will pause long enough to feel something shift. A moment of clarity, a strange calm, an idea that suddenly changes how they see their life. And when that happens, something interesting follows. Because moments like these rarely leave people unchanged. The window only lasts 48 hours. Then, slowly, everything returns to normal. The sky looks exactly the same as it did before. The stars remain in their distant places. The moon continues its quiet orbit. Life moves forward. People go to work. Traffic fills the streets. Phones keep buzzing with notifications. To most of the world, nothing unusual happened. But for the small number of people who notice something during that brief cosmic window, the experience can feel very different. Because moments like these sometimes leave behind a quiet change, a shift in perspective, a new way of looking at life. History is filled with strange examples of sudden insight appearing out of nowhere. Artists suddenly creating their greatest masterpiece. Inventors discovering solutions that had eluded them for years. Philosophers writing ideas that would shape entire generations. Many of them describe these breakthroughs in a similar way, not as something they forced, but as something that arrived. Almost like a door inside the mind opened for a brief moment, letting a new idea pass through. And then, just as quietly, the door closed again, which raises a fascinating possibility. Maybe the universe doesn't communicate with explosions or dramatic signs. Maybe it speaks in whispers. Maybe these rare cosmic alignments simply create moments when human awareness becomes slightly sharper. Moments when people can briefly step outside the noise of daily life and see their path more clearly. So perhaps the real question isn't whether the cosmic door exists. The real question is this: will you be paying attention when it opens? Because the next 48 hours may feel completely ordinary. Or they may bring a quiet moment of clarity, a realization, a single thought that changes everything. And if that happens, you might remember this moment, not as a prediction, but as a reminder. That sometimes the universe doesn't move mountains to get our attention. Sometimes it simply opens a door, very quietly, for a very short time, and only a few people notice.